Right now, there is a word that is quietly stealing your entire life, and you may not even notice it. It is the word later. Later when the work is done. Later when the house is quiet. Later when everyone else is taken care of. Later when life finally gives you permission to breathe. But later does not always arrive. Sometimes later becomes the quiet place where your unlived life waits by the door. This is the story of Roana, an old suitcase, and the terrifying moment she realized what she had actually been waiting for. In a small village at the edge of a long, dusty road, there lived a woman named Roana. She was not poor, she was not helpless, and she was not unhappy in the way people could easily see. Her little house was warm in winter, clean in summer, and always smelled faintly of tea, folded linen, and bread cooling on the table. Roana was the kind of woman who always had something to finish before she allowed herself to begin. There was always a shelf to dust, a meal to prepare, a letter to answer, a window to mend, a child to visit, a neighbor to help. And whenever someone asked about her own dreams, Roana smiled and said the same thing. One day, beside the front door of Roana's house stood an old brown suitcase. It was not large, it was not beautiful. Its corners were worn, the handle was cracked, and the brass buckles had lost their shine. But it was always there, not hidden under a bed, not tucked away in a cupboard, right beside the door, as if it were ready, as if she were ready. Inside the suitcase was a folded blue dress, carefully wrapped in thin paper, a small scarf with faded flowers, a box of colored pencils, an empty sketchbook, a dried white blossom pressed between 2 pages, and a map, creased so many times that the road lines had begun to disappear. At the very bottom was a note Roana had written when she was young. One day, I will see the sea. Soft wonder. Roana had never seen the sea. She had heard about it from travelers when she was a girl. They spoke of water so wide, it looked like the sky had fallen to the earth. They spoke of waves that breathed in and out like a sleeping giant. They spoke of mornings when the whole world turned silver before the sun rose. Roana had imagined herself there many times, standing barefoot where the water touched the sand, opening her sketchbook, drawing the horizon, breathing, without needing to hurry back. When she was 20, she packed the suitcase for the first time. She told herself she would go after the harvest. But the harvest ended, and her mother became ill. The house needed her hands. The soup needed stirring. The bed needed changing. The world asked for her again. And Roana answered.
Rest now, Mother. I will be right here.
So Roana stayed. When she was 27, she packed it again. She told herself she would go when the children were a little older. But children need shoes, soup, stories, and someone to sit beside them when the night feels too large.
Softly sleep,
the sea waited on the map.
Child.
The children
Stars
cried in the next
above
room.
are shining bright. Rest
So
in Mommy's
Roana
arms
stayed.
Tonight.
When she was 39, she took out the map and traced the road with her finger. She told herself she would go when the house no longer needed her. But roofs leak, floors crack, gardens overgrow. Winters come early. The world kept asking for her hands, while her own life waited quietly by the door. So Roana stayed. Once, in her 40s, she came closer than ever. She carried the suitcase outside before sunrise. The road was wet from morning rain. A village cart waited near the gate. its wheels sunk slightly into the mud. For one breath, Roana stood with her hand on the suitcase handle, and the road opened before her. Then someone called her name from inside the house.
Roana!
Nothing terrible, nothing dramatic, only a small need, the kind of need that always sounds reasonable. Roana turned back. She told herself it was only for that day, but that day became a week. The week became another season, and the suitcase returned to its place beside the door. When she was 50, her children had homes of their own. For the first time in many years, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Roana stood by the suitcase, touched the handle, and whispered, "Soon." But the word did not feel like a promise anymore. It felt like
Soon.
something she said because she did not know how to say anything else. Years passed. The suitcase stayed by the door. Guests stopped asking about it. Neighbors stopped noticing it. Even Roana began to walk past it without looking down. It became part of the house, like the table, like the stove, like the old chair near the window. Only once in a while, when she swept the floor, her broom would touch the suitcase, and the little sound would make something inside her pause. A small knock, a small reminder, a small voice saying, "Still here." One afternoon, Roana's granddaughter Lena came to visit. Lena was 8 years old, with curious eyes and the kind of hands that opened every box, drawer, and cupboard, not because she was rude, but because the world was still full of doors to her. While Roana was preparing tea, Lena sat near the front door and looked at the suitcase. "Grandmother," she called, "is this yours?" Roana turned and saw the suitcase open on the floor. For a moment, she could not speak. The blue dress lay unfolded in Lena's lap. The old map was spread across the floor. The box of colored pencils had been opened, and the sketchbook rested beside it, still clean after all those years. Lena touched the dress gently. "Where were you going?" Roana wiped her hands on her apron. "To the sea," she said. Lena's eyes widened. "The sea? Did you go?" Quietly. Roana smiled the small smile people use when the truth is too heavy for a child. "Not yet." Lighter. Lena looked at the map again. "When are you going?" Soft tension. Roana almost answered without thinking. "Soon." The word rose to her mouth like an old song. But something stopped it. Maybe it was the way the dress looked in the child's hands. Still beautiful, but no longer belonging to the woman who had packed it. Maybe it was the empty sketchbook. Maybe it was the map, whose edges had grown soft from being opened and folded without ever being followed. Roana looked at the suitcase, and for the first time in
You have
years,
grown up
she saw it.
so
Not as a
fast,
plan.
Lena.
Not as hope. Not as proof that one day she would begin. She saw it as a quiet witness. Lena looked up at her. "Grandmother, is the suitcase waiting for you, or are you waiting for it?" The room became very still. Outside, a cart passed on the road. A bird called from the roof. The kettle began to whisper over the fire, but Roana heard none of it. She looked at the suitcase by the door, and suddenly she understood. The suitcase had not been waiting for the right day. It had been counting the years she did not leave. That night, after Lena went home, Roana sat on the floor beside the open suitcase. She lifted the blue dress and held it against herself. It no longer fit the same way. Not because her body had betrayed her, but because time had moved where she had not. She opened the sketchbook. Every page was blank. Not ruined, not used badly, simply untouched. She picked up one colored pencil and pressed it to the first page. The tip broke at once, dry from years of waiting. Roana laughed softly. Then she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just the quiet tears of someone who finally sees how long she has been postponing herself. At the bottom of the suitcase, she found the note. One day, I will see the sea. The handwriting was hers, but younger, braver, almost impatient. Roana touched the words with her thumb.
Please,
and she whispered,
me. I am so
sorry I kept you waiting. She did not sleep much that night. Before dawn, she rose. She washed her face. She put fresh bread on the table. She folded the blue dress back into the suitcase. Not because it was perfect, but because it was hers. She sharpened the colored pencils one by one. She placed the sketchbook on top. Then she closed the suitcase. When she lifted it, it was heavier than she remembered. But it was not the weight of clothes, pencils, paper, and maps. It was the weight of every later she had ever spoken. She carried it to the door. For a long moment, her hand rested on the latch. The house behind her was quiet. The road outside was still gray with morning. Roana felt fear rise in her chest. Not the fear that says danger is near. The quieter fear that asks, what if it is too late? Then she remembered Lena's question. Is the suitcase waiting for you? Or are you waiting for it? Roana opened the door. The morning air entered the house. Cool. Clean. Uninvited. Alive. At the gate, Lena was standing with her small hands wrapped around the fence. She must have come early, too curious to stay away. Are you going? She asked. Roana looked down at the suitcase, then at the road, then at the little girl. For the first time in many years, she did not say, soon. She said, today. And she stepped onto the road. Not quickly, not like a young woman running from her life, but like someone finally walking toward it. Here is the truth this story carries. Most people do not lose their lives in one great tragedy. They lose them in small delays, in polite postponements, in reasonable excuses, in all the times they say later, when what they really mean is, I am afraid. My friend, maybe you have a suitcase by the door. It may not be made of leather. It may be a message you never sent, a dream you keep delaying, a place you keep promising to visit, a book you never opened, a song you never sang, a life you keep saving for the right moment. But a suitcase by the door is not a journey, and a life saved for later is still a life not lived. So today, choose one thing you keep calling later. Not 10 things, not your whole life, just one. Do one small thing that proves to your life you are no longer only waiting. Open the page, send the message, take the walk, touch the thing you have been afraid to begin. And if your heart whispers, not yet, answer gently, today, because later does not become life until you open the door and step into it. What is the one thing you are pushing to later? If this story found the suitcase inside you, write today in the comments below. Let it be your first step.